Fire her. Fire that black maid immediately. The words left Mr. Harrison's lips in a low, urgent hiss, the kind of tone meant to be heard only through the thin wire of his lapel mic. His jaw barely moved as he spoke, but the venom in his voice carried like static through the hidden earpiece of the head of security, stationed a discreet distance away. Harrison's eyes were not on the maid herself. They were locked instead on the polished glass doors of the Wellington Palace Hotel, five-star sanctuary to royals, CEOs, and celebrities, where a convoy of black luxury sedans had just pulled up. The frontmost car's rear door opened with smooth, mechanical precision, and the man stepping out was not just any guest. He was the kind of guest who made boards of directors rewrite annual budgets, who could make or break a hotel's global reputation with a single dinner conversation. Mr. Zhang, Chinese billionaire, property magnate, investor with a personal net worth that made small nations look poor. She can't be anywhere near this meeting, Harrison continued, voice clipped. The she in question was standing no more than 20 feet away, a tall black woman in a crisp but unremarkable gray housekeeping uniform, hair pulled into a tight bun, latex gloves on her hands, a spray bottle tucked into the cart she was pushing. She was aligning the silver trash bin with the edge of a marble column, her movements precise, almost invisible. To Harrison, she wasn't invisible enough. Not today. The Wellington Palace's lobby was a vision of controlled opulence, gleaming marble floors reflecting the golden fire of crystal chandeliers overhead, silk upholstered chairs perfectly aligned along the Persian rugs, air perfumed faintly with white orchids imported that morning. Every detail had been rehearsed. Every employee had a role to play, and Harrison had spent the last 48 hours making sure that the lobby, in these crucial 5 minutes before Mr. Zhang's arrival, would be flawless. Now in his mind, that flawless image had a stain, and it was in the form of the housekeeper quietly adjusting a wastebasket. Move her out, Harrison whispered again, his eyes never leaving the approaching entourage. The head of security's voice came through the earpiece in a low murmur. Understood, sir. The glass doors swung inward. 6 men in tailored charcoal suits stepped in first, each one with the slick efficiency of someone used to being both protector and negotiator. They fanned out, scanning the room with sharp, evaluating eyes. Then, framed by the doorway like the main act on a stage, came Mr. Zhang. His hair was slicked back, his posture upright, his tailored three-piece suit the color of midnight. A gold Patek Philippe from beneath his cuff. His left hand carried a leather briefcase rumored to contain preliminary contracts worth millions, possibly tens of millions. Harrison stepped forward with his most practiced smile, the one that had won him promotions, industry, awards, and the ear of more than one CEO. His tie was immaculate. His shoes gleamed. Every inch of him was rehearsed hospitality. Welcome to the Wellington Palace, Mr. Zhang, he said warmly, extending a hand. Zhang didn't take it. Instead, he began speaking in rapid, clipped Mandarin, his tone neither angry nor friendly, simply expectant. There was a subtle precision in his voice, like each word carried a precise weight that could not be dropped. Harrison froze for a fraction of a second, his professional smile faltering. Mandarin, the very language his front desk manager had suggested, preparing for, and he had dismissed without hesitation. Panic tightened his throat. He reached for his phone in a movement that felt far too slow. Just a moment, he muttered, forcing a light chuckle he didn't feel. He fumbled with the translation app, fingers tapping desperately. The spinning icon on the screen seemed to mock him, each second stretching impossibly long. The app finally beeped and a robotic voice emerged, mangling the tone so badly that even Harrison winced. Welcomely respected Big Honorable Hotel. it said in stilted English. Mr. Zhang's lips twitched, not with amusement, but with a wince so small it was almost imperceptible. Almost. I'm so sorry, Mr. Zhang, Harrison said quickly, trying to recover. I'm afraid none of our staff speak Mandarin. The words hung in the air like a sentence passed down from a judge. No Mandarin. No connection. No cultural respect. Billionaire's expression hardened by degrees, his fingers tightening slightly around the handle of his briefcase. His entourage exchanged subtle glances, their eyes carrying messages Harrison couldn't decode but instinctively knew were not in his favor. Harrison felt the bottom edge of his career tilt. And then the soft squeak of wheels on marble. The Maid. She was passing behind them, her cart loaded with neatly folded towels, a caddy of cleaning supplies, and a feather duster peeking out from the side. Her posture was straight, her face impassive, eyes meeting no one's for more than a second. Yet for a brief moment, as she crossed behind the billionaire, her gaze met his. It was fleeting, less than a heartbeat, but something flickered in the air between them. Not recognition, exactly, but the subtle acknowledgement of two people who understood far more than they were revealing. And then she was gone, disappearing around the curve of the grand staircase, vanishing as quietly as she had appeared. No one noticed her leave. No one saw the Harvard diploma in her name hanging in a tiny apartment across town. No one knew she held a master's degree from Beijing University. Mandarin flawless enough to hold her own in any boardroom in Shanghai. And no one had any idea that, in less than 3 hours, she would not only speak, she would append the entire balance of power in that room. But for now, Harrison's world was collapsing in slow motion, and the only sound louder than the silence was the soft hum of the air conditioning whispering through the grand, glittering lobby of the Wellington Palace Hotel. From the outside, the building stood in its usual stately composure, grand limestone facade, gilded revolving doors, polished brass fittings gleaming in the noon sun. But inside it was a hive, every hallway and backroom vibrating with the nervous energy of staff preparing for what their general manager had called the most important guest in the hotel's history. The employee break room, usually a place of half-hearted coffee and quiet gossip, now felt like a war room. Harrison stood at the front, pacing slowly, his hands clasped behind his back like a military commander about to brief troops on an operation. His perfectly tailored navy suit seemed immune to creases, his silk tie perfectly knotted. Mr. Zhang arrives at precisely 2 p.m. He began, his voice crisp, controlled. He spoke the name like it should mean something to everyone in the room, and it did. Even the newest bellboy knew the reputation of the man arriving that afternoon. His investment group, Harrison continued, controls over 30 luxury properties worldwide, resorts in Dubai, beachfront estates in Bali, skyscraper hotels. In Hong Kong, he's considering adding the Wellington to his portfolio. The room was silent, not because they were impressed, though they were, but because they understood the subtext. This wasn't just a guest. This was a gatekeeper. A man who could lift the Wellington onto the global stage with a single handshake, or dismiss it with a polite smile. This could mean international expansion for all of us, Harrison said, scanning the room, his gaze sharp enough to make even the seasoned concierge straighten. And for me, he allowed the pause just long enough. It could mean a call from the corporate office. He didn't say the word promotion, but the thought hung in the air like perfume. Everyone in that room knew Harrison had been clawing his way up the chain for 20 years. This deal wasn't just about the Wellington's future. It was about his own. Chef, the menu? Harrison's gaze landed on the head chef, a tall man with a spotless white coat and a clipped French accent. We are preparing a tasting menu featuring authentic Chinese delicacies, the chef replied. Peking duck, xiaolongbao, and a jasmine. Tea sorbet to finish. Good. Presentation must be flawless. He turned to maintenance. Presidential suite temperature? 72 degrees Fahrenheit, the supervisor said immediately. Exactly as requested. The concierge chimed in next. I've arranged VIP access to the Philharmonic rehearsal this evening, a private gallery tour tomorrow, and dinner. At La Fontaine, Harrison gave a small approving nod. Everything seemed in order. Then a hand went up at the far end of the table. It was Clara, the front desk manager. Young, ambitious, always more concerned with anticipating problems than with pleasing Harrison's ego. She spoke carefully. Sir, I heard Mr. Jiang prefers conducting business in Mandarin. Should we arrange for a translator? A faint smirk curved Harrison's lips. Not necessary. His assistant assured me he speaks perfect English. Besides, he tapped the side of his smartphone. We have the latest AI translation software on every hotel device. Practically human. Clara pressed her lips together but said nothing more. Harrison moved on. When the meeting wrapped, chairs scraped back and staff dispersed like well-trained soldiers returning to their posts. But Harrison had one more stop to make. He intercepted the head of housekeeping. Emma, in the doorway. Double quotes, Emma, make sure your staff is invisible today, he said. I want the rooms maintained as if by magic. No guest should see your people working. Emma, who had been running housekeeping at the Wellington for longer than Harrison had been general manager, didn't flinch. Of course, sir. They know the drill. Good. Within minutes, the transformation began. Fresh flowers, white orchids and lily appeared in every corner of the lobby, each arrangement angled precisely so the blossoms caught the light. The grand piano near the reception desk was polished. To a mirror shine, its lid propped open as if ready for an impromptu performance. Ambient music played at just the right volume, audible, but never competing with conversation. Security began its discreet sweep, scanning for anything out of place. The bell staff practiced their synchronized door opening and luggage handling routine until it looked effortless. The kitchen prepped like a Michelin star brigade, every knife stroke in rhythm, every plate handled as though it were made of gold. Upstairs, the presidential suite became a work of art. Egyptian cotton sheets were ironed directly on the bed for that military flat perfection. The minibar was stocked with exact brands requested by Jiang's assistant. Even the placement of the fruit in the crystal bowl had been debated and adjusted until the green grapes formed a perfect crescent around the pivot of the round. Mangoes. And at the center of it all stood Harrison, directing the flow like a conductor before a symphony. His eyes missed nothing. He adjusted the height of the welcome banner by an inch. He corrected a porter's posture. He even replaced a single orchid in the main arrangement when he decided its petals were slightly fatigued. 20 years ago, Harrison had been a front desk clerk with a second-hand suit and a borrowed tie. He had survived budget cuts, outlasted 3 general managers, and turned the Wellington into a place where he could anticipate a guest's complaint before they even stepped through the door. But this was different. The stakes were higher. The risk sharper. If Mr. Jiang walked away unimpressed, it wouldn't just mean a lost business opportunity. It would mean the regional director's polite but pointed disappointment, the quiet whispers among the corporate leadership that Harrison wasn't quite ready for the top tier. And there would be no second chance with a man like Jiang. Harrison straightened the slightly crooked painting near the lobby elevators, then glanced at his watch. 1 hour until showtime. He took a deep breath, smoothed the front of his jacket, and smiled. Not the warm smile he gave guests, but the thin, controlled one he reserved for moments when everything depended on perfect execution. The Wellington wasn't just a hotel today. It was a stage. And every single person in it, was an actor in his production. She didn't take offense. After 15 years of managing housekeeping at the Wellington, Emma understood how the game was played. Guests came for the illusion, perfection without visible effort. The room was spotless, but no one saw the mop. The bed was crisp, but no one saw the hands that smoothed it. The crystal glass sparkled, but no one saw the cloth that polished it. So, Emma gathered her team in the narrow linoleum-floored staff corridor. The faint hum of the industrial dryers filled the space, and the smell of fresh linen mingled with the sharper scent of disinfectant. "All right," she began, her voice calm but firm. "You all heard the man. Invisible means invisible. That doesn't mean you slack off. It means you move when no one's looking. Hallways clear before guests turn the corner. Rooms handled between their comings and goings. And today?" She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "We're doing it under a microscope. So keep your radios low, your carts neat, and your tempers tighter than your corners." There were murmurs of agreement, a few nods. Housekeeping was a thankless job, but Emma's crew took pride in their work. They didn't expect applause, but they knew their absence could be felt more than their presence. One of her team, a tall black woman named Amara, tightened the knot on her gray apron. Her eyes flickered with quiet thoughtfulness as Emma continued with the assignments. Amara was not the type to speak unless spoken to, and she carried herself with a reserve that some mistook for shyness. But Emma knew better. There was something precise in her movements, deliberate in her silences. She'd been on staff only a year, but in that time she had never made a careless mistake, never needed to be told twice. When the meeting ended, the team dispersed into the hidden arteries of the hotel, the service elevators, the back stairwells, the narrow corridors that ran behind guest suites. In the grand lobby, Harrison paced like a stage manager. The orchids were perfect, the lighting warm, the air carrying the faintest scent of jasmine tea. He had already rehearsed the sequence in his head. The billionaire would arrive, be greeted. In English, be escorted to the suite, be charmed over a curated lunch, and sign preliminary agreements before departure. No surprises, no deviations. He didn't notice Amara slipping into the periphery, pushing her cart toward the marble-columned corner near the elevators. She worked quietly, aligning a brass wastebasket with the baseboard, adjusting a lamp so that its light fell evenly on the arm of a velvet armchair. She didn't rush. She didn't linger. She moved like someone who understood timing, how to exist in a space without disturbing it. Upstairs, in the service elevator, two junior housekeepers whispered about the guest of honor. "They say he's richer than the Prince of Qatar," one said, balancing a stack of towels. "Yeah? And they say if he likes the place, he might buy it." "Imagine working for a billionaire," the other replied. Amara stood silently beside them, hands resting on the cart's handle. She didn't join in. She'd heard their excitement before, whenever a celebrity, dignitary, or oligarch passed through. She knew how quickly admiration could turn to indifference once the novelty faded. Her mind was elsewhere. Mandarin phrases flickered through her memory, as easily recalled as the sound of her own name. She hadn't spoken the language in years, not since Beijing. And yet, as the elevator shuddered to a stop, she could hear her old professor's voices in her mind, feel the rhythm of the tones on her tongue. Downstairs, Harrison was giving last-minute directives to the concierge when the head of security approached. "Lobby perimeter clear," the man said in a low tone. "Press has been kept back a block. No one expected a riftles." "Ah, good," Harrison said, his eyes scanning the space again. That was when he spotted Amara, just a glimpse of her gray uniform moving past the far column. His jaw tightened. Why is she out here? He muttered into his lapel mic. The head of security's earpiece crackled. Housekeeping sweep. She's scheduled for this floor. Then get her out of sight. Now, Harrison said. The words clipped and cold. Emma's voice came over the housekeeping radio a moment later. Amara, lobby level is hot. Relocate to the mezzanine until we're clear. There was no irritation in Amara's response, just a soft understood. She pivoted her cart, gliding toward the side hallway. The wheels made barely a whisper against the marble. She caught one last glimpse of the front entrance, sunlight glinting off the glass doors, the faint reflection of black sedans outside, and something, deep and still within her, stirred backstage. For that was what the Wellington really was today, a theater. Preparations moved like clockwork. The chef's team plated bite-sized dumplings for a tasting tray. The concierge rehearsed his lines in his head, ready to mention every connection to Chinese art, cuisine, and culture the city could offer. Security's eyes swept the entrance, in rehearsed patterns, and yet, amid all that movement, Amara kept her pace steady. No one looked at her twice. No one asked what she was thinking. If they had, they might have noticed her glancing occasionally toward the lobby. Not with longing, with assessment. The way a chess player studies a board before the first move. Harrison checked his watch. 10 minutes until arrival. His pulse ticked up. He straightened his tie for the third time in as many minutes. Everything was perfect, or at least it appeared to be. What Harrison didn't know, what no one in that glittering lobby knew, was that the real variable, the unpredictable element in his meticulously rehearsed day, wasn't Mr. Jiang. It was the maid he had. Just ordered out of sight. 2 minutes until the convoy rolled up and the Wellington's future. His future stepped through those gleaming glass doors. He swept his gaze across the lobby. One final time. The orchids were fresh. The lighting warm but not harsh. The music, a soft, instrumental arrangement of classic jazz, was tuned to a level where guests could hear it without having to raise their voices. It was perfection. Perfection manufactured. The doormen, clad in deep navy coats with brass buttons, stood at their posts like statues. The concierge waited by the front desk, posture perfect, hands clasped. The bellboys were positioned for a seamless luggage transfer. Harrison straightened his tie again and positioned himself squarely in front of the entrance. He imagined the moment. Mr. Jiang would step inside, see the immaculate grandeur, shake his hand, and know at once that this was a place worth investing in. The low rumble of engines broke the quiet. The convoy. Through the spotless glass, the first black sedan rolled to a stop, followed by another, then another, until 6 vehicles lined the curb. The front doors opened in practice sequence, and men in dark suits emerged, scanning the street and sidewalk. Then the rear door of the central sedan opened, and Mr. Jiang stepped out. He moved like a man who didn't need to rush because the world would wait for him. His charcoal gray suit looked like it had been cut directly onto his frame. The shine of his black leather shoes caught the light. His hair was styled with meticulous precision, not a strand out of place. In his left hand was a leather briefcase, slim but heavy-looking, the kind that carried papers that could change the ownership of entire buildings. Harrison drew in a deep breath and stepped forward, smile fixed, hand outstretched. "Welcome to the Wellington Palace, Mr. Jiang." But the billionaire didn't shake his hand. He didn't even slow his stride. Instead, his dark eyes met Harrison's for the briefest moment before he began speaking. Rapid-fire Mandarin. The syllables crisp, the tone authoritative. Harrison froze. His mind stalled like a machine with its gears suddenly jammed. He caught only a few words, enough to recognize a greeting, perhaps a question, but they were meaningless without the rest. He forced a small chuckle, fumbling for his phone. "Just a moment," he said, thumb tapping the screen faster than his composure allowed. The translation app opened, its little microphone icon pulsing like an impatient heartbeat. "Go ahead," Harrison urged. Mr. Jang repeated himself, voice calm but with an undercurrent of impatience. The app processed, its spinning icon mocking the urgency of the moment. Finally, the robotic voice emerged, distorted and too loud in the stillness of the lobby. "Welcomely respected Big Honorable Hotel." The butchery was painful. Harrison winced. So did Mr. Jang. One of the suited men at Jang's side glanced at another, a barely perceptible exchange of "this is what we're dealing with" in their eyes. Harrison's smile thinned. I'm so sorry, Mr. Jang," he said quickly. "I'm afraid none of our staff speak Mandarin." The words landed with a heaviness that even the floral scent in the air couldn't mask. No Mandarin. No bridge. No cultural courtesy. Mr. Jang's expression cooled, his jaw tightening by the smallest fraction. He gave a curt nod, as though filing the information away under unprepared. The entourage moved past Harrison into the lobby, their footsteps echoing off the marble floor. Harrison followed, trying to recover, his mind scrambling for a new opening. Anything to pull the meeting back on track. And then, the soft squeak of wheels on marble. From the far side of the lobby, a gray uniformed maid pushed her cart, moving toward the service hallway. She kept her eyes down, posture straight. Her cart was neatly arranged, folded towels on one side, cleaning supplies in their holders, a feather duster tucked discreetly along the edge. But as she passed behind the entourage, something happened. Her eyes lifted, just for a moment, and met Mr. Jang's. It was not the glance of a startled staff member avoiding reprimand. It was steady, measured, a look that conveyed awareness, intelligence, and perhaps even curiosity. It lasted less than a second before she looked away, her expression returning to neutrality. But in that second, Jang's gaze sharpened, as though he had caught the faintest glint of something unexpected. No one else noticed. Not Harrison, who was too busy rehearsing his next line in English. Not the entourage, who were scanning the architecture with polite disinterest. Not the guests in the corner, who had paused their conversation to watch the billionaire pass. The maid disappeared into the side corridor, wheels squeaking softly until the sound faded entirely. Harrison exhaled, unaware that anything had passed. Between his guest and the staff member he had ordered out of sight. In his mind, the game was still about recovering from the translation debacle. He had no idea that the real turning point had just happened behind his back, because the woman in the gray uniform, the one whose Harvard diploma and Beijing University master's degree hung in a modest apartment across town, had heard every word Mr. Jang had spoken, and she knew exactly what he had asked. 3 hours from now, she would decide whether or not to answer him. It was supposed to be a simple, elegant lunch, the kind of carefully orchestrated hospitality experience that made investors open their wallets without hesitation. But 30 minutes into the meeting, Harrison could feel the deal slipping like water through his fingers. They were seated in the private dining room, all polished mahogany panels, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, and a long table draped in linen so crisp it could have sliced air. The chef had outdone himself. Delicate xiaolongbao steamed to perfection, thinly sliced Peking duck arranged like petals on porcelain platters, bowls of jasmine-scented rice served in gleaming lacquered dishes. And yet, Mr.